Hi, everyone. I'm Amber Masso, the Director of Communications and Alumni Engagement for the Terry Foundation. I'm so pleased to be joined today by one of our Terry alumni, and I can't wait for you to watch our chat. So I'll allow him to introduce himself now.
Well, hi, everybody. My name is Chris Barton. I am a 1989 Terry Scholar at UT Austin. I live in Austin now, and I got a history degree from UT, but I am now a published author of children's books. I write both fiction and nonfiction books, primarily picture books. Um, Everything from a book called Shark versus Train, that's about a shark versus a train, to a picture book biography of Texas Congresswoman Barbara Jordan.
Um, Chris, I was really excited to get the opportunity to chat with you today. I think I've mentioned before, we had some of your books sitting around in the office. So I really appreciate you reaching out, like coming forward to say that you'd like to record one of these. What do you hope that Terry scholars will be able to learn from our conversation?
I hope that maybe they will learn earlier than I learned that the path that we're on at the time we're a Terry scholar, that we're in college. There are going to be twists and turns in our lives that we can't anticipate, and that we may not end up on the path that we thought we were on. And that's fine. That's great. So many of the people that I write about ended up on different paths from where they began. I'm on a different path from where I began, and I could never have predicted that I would get here. Just like the people I write about would never have predicted that they would end up where they were. But it's been a really satisfying journey for me, and I hope people will have the will allow themselves the gift of being open to opportunities and alternatives that they have not considered, that they're not so committed to one particular vision of their future that they won't entertain the possibility that there are other paths that they might actually be better suited for or might get more satisfaction out of.
That's great. Well, Terry's, I hope y'all enjoy the video. I do have to say, I was able to go to the foundation's office and we have, what do you do with a voice like that? We had Shark versus Train, which I always saw in the office, and then I grabbed it a couple of times and would start looking at it, and then something else would happen. So I was so excited to sit down and finally read it because it's like super cute. And then we had the Dayglow Brothers.
Okay.
So I was happy to get a sampling of some of your work. And I love how different all of them are, but I love how they encourage critical thinking, especially Shark versus Train. Like in and of itself could seem like it's such a silly concept, but just thinking about all the ways the train would be better in one situation versus the shark would be better. I thought that was really clever. So I enjoyed that a lot. My favorite was definitely the Barbara Jordan book.
Well, I appreciate that. That one is very, very close to my heart.
And we had the ability to chat a little bit, beforehand about your journey, but why children's books? Like why is this what you're doing now?
Well, if a person were to look back at my entire life and see, what I did when I was a kid and what I studied in school, and the fact that, I write books for children, I write both fiction, kind of ridiculous fiction, and seriously researched nonfiction, that would all make sense because I loved writing ridiculous stories when I was growing up by myself or with friends of mine. In high school, my passion was journalism. That's working for the Daily Texan was the whole reason I came to UT, because I wanted to be part of that environment, of that operation. And I was a history major. I graduated with a history degree. So if you look at it that way, it all makes sense that I would do this, but it did not make sense at all to me at the time. Like I got out of college, writing books for children was nowhere on my radar. I felt like I kind of drifted off course, or off what I thought was my course, in the years just after I got out of college. But when I was 29 and I was the father of a toddler, he Well, the thing about toddlers is, if they like something a little bit, they tend to like that thing a lot and want it over and over. That repetition is how their brains develop. And when my son was almost 2, he insisted over and over and over that I tell him the story of how I'd installed a smoke alarm in our house. And I remember one morning as I was getting dressed for work, I had 3 epiphanies in about 15 seconds. Number one, if I were to write that story down, somebody else could tell him that story for a change. Number two, if he liked that story so much, maybe I could make up other stories like it and write those down. And 3, if he liked those other stories, maybe other kids would like them too. And I immediately went into research mode that day, because like it had never occurred to me, how do you become a children's author? And I found that there were books I could read, like books about the craft, books about the business. There was an organization that I could join. So, but it was really that inspiration from, telling the story over and over to my son. And I began by writing some truly, truly terrible stories. I mean, completely unpublishable. I didn't know it at the time. I was so in love with what I had written, but no one's going to see those stories because they're awful. But that's how I got started. And, and also I realized, because I discovered that there was this organization that I could join, and a community here in Austin of established authors and aspiring writers and established illustrators and aspiring artists who want to make books for kids. Realizing that there was this community I could be a part of, I could see how that tied back into what was important to me when I was growing up. How I loved being part of a team that was writing stories, or part of a newspaper staff or magazine staff that was creating publication, being part of that community. And that's, I think, what really appealed to me about coming to UT and working for the Daily Texan, was the sense of camaraderie I knew about from reading the farewell columns that the Daily Texan staff would publish at the end when they were about to graduate. So I had a sense of wanting to be a part of a community like that. And then I just stumbled into it because of the story that my son wanted me to tell him over and over.
So what do you think it was about that story in particular? Because you were telling it, or were there some fantastical elements to it? I mean, or just the way that you told it?
Well, I think part of it is that particular child, the kinds of things that were of interest to him, the way his brain works. One of the first things he ever said or asked, like one of the first full sentences I remember him saying was, "How does a mule work?" As if a mule were a mechanical device instead of a farm animal. So that's kind of the level that he operated on then, and kind of still operates on today. So he was, a story about some real thing, how something happened, and the fact I think he had seen me installing the smoke alarm. And I think kids love hearing stories about things that they themselves have seen, or about people that they know, or about they themselves. And there may have been some sound effects. I don't recall whether I had the drill sound or the smoke alarm sound beep, if I had those. Because I've told the story about that story many times, but probably I'd read enough picture books to him by that point that I knew, jazz up a story with a little bit of of sound effects, of wordplay, something to keep it interesting, a repetition. But I don't know of any other child necessarily that would have been enraptured by that particular story. It was just the right story for the right kid at the right age, where hearing something over and over and over, or doing anything over and over and over, that's something that toddlers really get into.
There's that idea of just the relevance, and like you said, finding the right story. So knowing just the 3 stories of yours that I was able to find at the office, how do you choose what is the right story? How do you choose the story that you want to tell whenever you're working on a concept?
Usually I've got a long list of story ideas that I could write. Now, I've never had a problem of saying I don't know what to write about. To the extent that's a problem, is that I've got a list of 10 or 20 or 50 things, and it may just be a phrase. I may not know what the story there actually is, but some idea occurred to me. I wrote it down. We'll call that a story idea. But generally, out of all those, there's one in particular that I cannot stop thinking about. And a great example of that was my first book, The Dayglow Brothers. I actually learned, so The Dayglow Brothers is a nonfiction picture book. It's a biography of these two brothers who invented Dayglow colors, those super bright oranges and yellows and pinks and greens that are so bright that they glow in ordinary daylight. And that's why they're called Dayglow. I had first read about these guys years before I had that smoke alarm epiphany. I'd read about them when the latter of the two brothers died, and the New York Times had an obituary about it. And it talked about, about their invention of these colors. And it occurred to me, I had seen these colors my whole life, but it had never occurred to me that people had invented those colors, that people could invent new colors. So that was more than 3 years before I got the idea I wanted to write books for kids. But I kept thinking about that story. I kept thinking about this thing I'd read in the New York Times. Even though I did not have any outlet to do anything with that story, it kept coming back to me. And a few months after I realized I wanted to write books for kids, I thought of that story. I thought, there's something about that story that appeals to me, or else I would not keep thinking about it. And that's still something that really guides me today, is what is a story that I cannot stop thinking about? Of all the ideas that I've got, which one do I find myself, do I find my mind wandering to when I go out for a walk, or when I go out for a run, or when somebody asks, what I've been reading or thinking about or doing lately, and I gravitate toward that particular story. In general, on average, it takes about 5 years for a story to go from something I begin actively working on to when it's a published book and you can get it in schools and libraries and bookstores. And 5 years is kind of a long time. So you better be really engaged with that idea, because you might be working on it for a long, long time. And I think that's it served me well that I've recognized the value in what can I not stop thinking about? What is my brain attracted to?
I think somewhere in there, there's also a lesson in just enjoying the journey overall too, especially since you don't know ultimately what your end result is going to be, or when you're even going to get to that end result. And you really do seem like you enjoy the whole process along the way. So, and I think that translates to more than just children's books, obviously.
Yes, I mean that's the appreciating the journey is important when you're at it for even just an individual book for 5 years. And I've found that, especially in the nonfiction that I write, often I'm attracted to stories of people who ended up not at all where they thought they were going to go. Just in the case of Bob and Joe Switzer and the Dayglow Brothers, one brother wanted to be a doctor and one wanted to be a magician. And fate kind of intervened, and they ended up creating these brand new colors. But then, as I point out at the end of the book, one brother wanted to save lives, one wanted to dazzle crowds. And through these super bright colors, they did both of those things. Each of my nonfiction books is in some way about a person or a group of people ending up far from where they began, but hopefully in a way that's satisfying for them and satisfying for the reader as well.
I think, it's mirrored a lot too. And I think the story of Barbara Jordan, and just where, the path that she was on, and then where she ultimately ended up being, but obviously still made a huge impact as a teacher, and probably would have continued amplifying that impact even if she'd gotten into doing that earlier, but needed that journey beforehand probably to make her as impactful of a teacher as she was.
Absolutely. And she really had two times in her life when she got reoriented and going in a direction other than where she thought she was going. When she was in high school in Houston, there was a Black woman attorney who came to speak to her. She went to Phyllis Wheatley High School. And this was one of the few Black women attorneys in the country. And Barbara Jordan was so inspired by that speech that she decided that that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to go to law school. So she went to Texas Southern and got her bachelor's, and went to Boston University for law school and became a lawyer. But as I say in the book, being a lawyer bored her. It was there was not enough work to occupy her time or her mind, and she needed something else to do. Around that time, she got involved in politics and rose very quickly. Served 6 years in the Texas Senate, 6 years in the U.S. Congress, but then for health reasons, she had multiple sclerosis. She knew that she could not perform at the level she wanted and maintain the privacy that she wanted to maintain um, as an elected official. And so she changed direction again. She came back to Texas and she began teaching at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at UT. And she actually did that for far longer than she was an elected official. She did that for the last 17 and a half years of her life and affected lots and lots of people who themselves, in going on to careers in public service, affected lots and lots of people. Mm. But that was not where she saw herself going when she was in high school. She was going to be an attorney.
Right. Well, and even, you'd mentioned the Dayglow Brothers before, and just the journeys that they thought they needed to be on.
Right.
And, we're only exposed to so many options when we're young. There's only so many paths that feel like they've been well traveled and they're clear. And so we try to put ourselves on one of those that might seem like the best approximation of where we should be going. Or sometimes we're told, hey, you're good at this, or you seem to have a knack for this, so that's the direction you should go. So I find it interesting that these are the kind of stories you tell when you yourself had a very similar journey in terms of going one direction and doing one thing that you thought you needed to be doing, and then kind of just hooking a less traveled road. What do you think the lesson is in that for people who are on maybe one of those paths themselves, just because they don't know any different?
I think it's always useful at any age to keep in mind that the thing in life you're going to be best at may be something you have not even started doing yet. It may be something you've never even heard of doing yet or never have contemplated doing. And I think that can be true at any age. The younger you are, the more likely it is true. So I think it's important, no matter how much you may love what you're doing now or how into a particular field you are, be aware that there's a lot of stuff out there that you don't even know anything about yet. And if you're a curious person, you're going to love learning about those other things. Now I have grown more curious as a person as I've gotten older. I think that was a shortcoming that I had around the time I was in college, around the time I was a Terry Scholar. I was so locked in on what I thought I wanted to do that I was not real curious about other options. I was really into journalism, but kind of a particular type of journalism. I wanted to, it was like a hybrid of politics and music. I mean, for me growing up, I grew up in Sulphur Springs, which is a town of about 14,000 people up in Northeast Texas. When I was growing up in the 1980s, Rolling Stone magazine was a lifeline to me. It came every 2 weeks in the mail. We didn't have cable. So we had sub basic cable. So basically no MTV is the important thing. There was so much of the outside world I didn't know much about. So it came to me through Rolling Stone, and Rolling Stone, to my mind at the time, its main emphases were on, politics and music. Maybe in that order, maybe not. When I was right around the time I was graduating from high school, I was at our local newspaper office, which is where my high school newspaper was published. That's where the print office was. And there was an editor of a county publication. This is a rural county, so this is kind of an agricultural type publication, or at least catering to the many rural residents of Hopkins County. And this editor knew of my interest in journalism. I was the editor of my high school paper, and asked me if I wanted to write an article for this, I think it was called County World or Country World, about this blueberry farm out in Hopkins County. And I thought, no, I don't want to write. I don't care about blueberries. Do I look like somebody who goes around writing about blueberry farms? And I just cringe now every time I think of that reaction, because every single question I would have asked, everything that somebody would have told me about blueberry farming would have been something new to me. And I thrive on that now. I crave that now. That's one of the things I love so much about writing nonfiction is I learned so much about things I never even knew I was going to have questions about.
Mm.
I like that aspect of me now a whole lot more than I like the 17 on the cusp of 18-year-old version of me who turned up his nose at writing about a blueberry farm.
Well, we all know everything at that age, clearly. So
I think some more than others. You know, some they may have that trait in themselves. Some they may have it as part of their family's culture. I know I had some people in my family. My grandfather, especially on my mom's side, was very certain of what he knew, and he knew a whole lot of things. I don't know if that was part of my personality, or if I was just so achievement oriented that I saw this path laid out for myself and I had these blinders on to where all I was seeing was a path that would lead me to something like being editor of Rolling Stone, or something that was focused on politics and or music. And so I was so focused on achieving that and achieving things really as quickly as I could that I didn't allow myself to appreciate these distractions or these things along the side that might have been life changing. I mean, I can't really complain about it now because I really like where life has taken me. But I do wish I'd been more open earlier in my life to other possibilities. I actually went on to become. I spent several months while I was in college as an intern in New York at Rolling Stone magazine. And I've wondered since then, what if, because I still had to come back to Austin for 2 more semesters of school. And I wondered over the years, what if somebody had said, hey, rather than go back to Texas, there are all these children's book publishing companies here in New York. What if you stick around here and get a job working for a children's book publisher? They'd be happy to hire you. Even though I know now that working in children's publishing would be the ideal job for me, I don't think myself at that age when I was, I guess I was 21 at the time, I don't think it would have had any appeal to me because it was outside what I was narrowly focused on. I guess it was not the right job, not the right field for me at that time. Now, within the decade, it was exactly where I wanted to be.
Yeah. Well, at that moment in time, though, you knew all you needed, or you thought you knew all you needed to know for the current path you were on. So yeah, I think that shift in perspective and the relevance to the situation combined is what's important. And I think that happens to a lot of people, and sometimes they don't realize that's what's happening or what needs to happen. So for me, it was being a doctor and going down the pre-med path. That's the only electives I wanted to take when you got to what few electives you could choose in high school.
Right.
When I built my schedule, my first couple of years in college, same thing. It was like, well, what are all the science classes I need? What's going to make me competitive? And what's going to help me prepare for the MCAT? That's all I need to focus on. And then after my freshman year, I actually was diagnosed with cancer and became a patient myself and got sort of the other perspective, the other side of things. And I remember coming back into school and thinking more and more about some of my experiences as a patient and maybe how being the physician wasn't as appealing anymore.
Right.
So this idea of working in nonprofits and working to support families who were going through something as difficult as I had was in the back of my mind, but it also, there was the thought, well, you're really, really good in all of these classes. This stuff comes so naturally to you. This is all you've ever worked on. Why would you change directions? Or why all of a sudden is this the thought process you're having? Right. So even that internal resistance and sort of trying to justify, well, why are you changing directions? Look what you're good at. Look at all of the work that you've put into building yourself in a certain direction. That's hard when it's coming from us internally, but then if you add in any sort of external factors or family expectations, think that's probably something a lot of Terry scholars can relate to as well, particularly our first generation students, who that's a lot to carry on your shoulders, being the first person to sort of take that journey into higher education and all of the expectations that come along with it.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you feel like there's been a financial investment made in what you've already done, and it's one thing to intellectually know, that money is spent. There's this concept, the fallacy of sunk costs, but people will continue investing in something because they've already invested a lot in it. It's easy to you can be aware of that concept of these sunk costs, but can still be awfully hard to to act on that knowledge when it's your own life, when it's your future that people have invested in, and you feel like they're counting on you to do this thing that you said you were going to do. I think it's also important to keep in mind that people put their trust in you. You may feel like they put their trust in what you thought that you wanted to do, or they put their trust in what you said you were going to do or what you intended to do, but they're putting their trust in you. And you are this full package of intellect and of ambition and empathy and compassion and curiosity about the world, and you change along the way. And so if they're going to put their trust in you, they need to put their trust in the person you are developing into along the way, in part because of the trust that they've already put in you. We want to be around for many, many, many decades. You don't want to find yourself when you're 70 doing something that you haven't really wanted to do since you were 20, but because you told people when you were 18 that that's what you're going to do. That's a long time to be not as satisfied with your part in the world as you could be. I know so many children's book authors who are lawyers. It's not that they said, okay, I want to be a children's book author, better go to law school, better pass the bar. I think typically the way it's been explained to me, because I'm not a lawyer, the way it's been explained to me is that you've got people who love to write. They don't want to teach. People say, well, lawyers write a lot, you should go to law school. So they go to law school, and being a lawyer, as with Barbara Jordan, it's not what makes them happy. And so they look for some other way that they can use this this talent that they have. And I know that's a really surprisingly large number of lawyers who have become children's authors, but I think there are also things that they can apply from what they learned in law school, from what they learned as they were practicing law. There are ways that you can apply that to this next career that you've got. There are things that I learned in the process of my work on behalf of our customers at my day job, things that I've learned that make me better at running my business. My wife, who's also a full-time author, she and I are full-time authors. And so we're, in addition to being authors, we are entrepreneurs, we are small business people. And so all these things I've done along the way in these other roles, I found ways to apply to what I'm doing now. And the history degree that I got, when I was at UT, it's not the history degree necessarily that I'm putting to use, but I'm certainly doing, I'm doing a lot more historical work now than I ever did while I was getting my bachelor's degree. I did not do the work of a historian while I was getting my BA. I read books by people who had done the work of historians. Now I'm getting my hands on, on primary sources and doing the research that a historian does. So I'm able to put to use that side of my background as well, the history studying side of me. And so all these things have come together, even though I've gone down a different path from what I thought I was going to do, or what the Terry Foundation or other people who provided scholarships, what they had thought I was going to do based on what I told them when I was 18. The Terry Foundation has never come back to me and said, "Hey, Chris, you're not editor of Rolling Stone. We want our scholarship money back." It's been nothing but enthusiasm and encouragement from the Terry Foundation for the path my life has gone down.
Well, and having worked on a couple of documentaries about Mr. Terry and learning from people like Rhett Campbell and Ed Cottam about the way that he thought and the way that he invested in people, you know, that investment was so that you could get to the point where you were able to ask yourself those what if questions. Well, what if this is the different path I'm supposed to take? Or what if this is what I'm good at, but this is what I'm good at and will make me happy over here? So I think, you know, in his own way, being able to say, what's going to get in the way of you asking yourself those questions, or what's going to get in the way of you feeling like you can truly explore? And for most people, unfortunately, it's that financial barrier, and it's feeling some obligation because of what might be invested in your education, or how hard you may have had to work, or the pressure of being the first one to be educated at the level you are in your family. So I think that, you know, if anybody takes anything away from Mr. Terry's gift, I always hope that they see it as a gift of freedom, because that's what he was hoping to provide, so that you could turn around and make the most impact you possibly could with all of the tools that you possess, you know, inherently, and being able to discover how best you are capable of using them, like individual to your own situation. So.
And I imagine that there are lots of Terry alumni who could tell their own stories about how this is the path I was going down. This is where I ended up going, and I'm so happy that I did. There are, you know, lots of great picture book biographies about people who've gone someplace other than where they thought they were going to go. You know, I'm not the only one who's attracted to these stories. I think those just make more interesting stories. And so, and it's kind of a, you know, it's a little bit self-serving to say that we're in a golden age of nonfiction books for children, but I feel like the other authors and creators in this industry, we keep raising the bar on each other. And so there really are just lots and lots of great short, very well researched, very well written biographies. So if you ever feel you're in the need of a fix of inspiration or just insight into other people who went down a path other than where they thought they're going, you know, go to your public library, go to your kid's school library and ask a librarian for recommendations for new picture book biographies, and find out about the lives those people went down. I've written about these three brothers from a small town in Utah who went on the vaudeville circuit, you know, kind of doing these acrobatic routines. They ended up establishing the Nutcracker as an American holiday tradition. I've written about a guy named John Roy Lynch who was enslaved. And within 10 years during the Civil War and Reconstruction, he went from being an enslaved teenager to becoming a U.S. congressperson. You know, I'm writing a book now about a man named Alton Yates, a young black man from Jacksonville, Florida, who found himself in the Air Force participating in the mid to late 50s, participating in these experiments that were basically, you know, precursors to NASA, to see what the human body could tolerate with regard to, you know, space travel, or rapid acceleration and deceleration. That was not what he thought he was going to be doing when he was, you know, a teenager in Jacksonville. And then a few years after that, he found himself back in Jacksonville, involved in the civil rights movement. And so I love the twists and turns that these people's lives take, as they react to circumstances, as they react to their own growing awareness of the opportunities that this world has to offer.
I have to say too, a lot of the children's books that I've read recently, including yours and the one about Barbara Jordan, they don't feel like a children's book as you would traditionally think of them too. And I think that's the thing I most appreciate about it, is the voice being used isn't speaking down to, or even diluting the message for the audience just because it's a younger audience. I mean, kids are being exposed to the same world we are. They don't have the same context maybe, or the same frame of reference, but that's one thing that I have really appreciated from looking at the way children's books are written now to the ones that I remember from when I was little. There could be some bias in there too, obviously, from my adult perspective looking back, but they don't feel like they're just written for a child's mind to to look at it as just a story, but being written so that they can apply it to the world around them. So
No,
that's
I'm really glad to hear that observation, because I definitely believe that there's more respect paid toward the sensibilities and the intellect of children than and the fact that children deserve, you know, actual information, true information, as opposed to, you know, a lot of the whitewashing and fictionalized nonfiction that were in these biographies that I devoured when I was in elementary school. But now I look back and think, well, how much of that was even true?
right.
And so that's when I talk about the bar being raised on children's nonfiction. A lot of it is how respectful are we in making sure that we provide, you know, accurate information in a way that's accessible, in a way that that, you know, we can't tell everything that there is to tell about a subject in a 32 or 40 or 48 page picture book, but hopefully we can, you know, we can spark that interest to where a good number and provide information on where more information can be found. Hopefully we can spark an interest in a lot of these readers that, okay, I want to know more about this part of this story that I just read. You know, but recognize that, you know, that's, you know, they're deserving of good information, and that they're hungry for good information. You know, it's funny, as we talk, I'm thinking of things that I say when I visit schools, or now when I Zoom with schools. You know, and talking about my nonfiction, I say, well, for all my books, I don't write any book because I'm an expert in that subject. I write my books because I've got a lot of questions and a lot of curiosity, and writing a book is my way of answering those questions and satisfying that curiosity. And I point out that, you know, for all of my nonfiction books, I could not write any of those using only the information that's already in my head. I do lots and lots and lots of research for every nonfiction book that I make. So I try to get across that idea that there's so much more out there than even I, at my very, very advanced age, know. There's so much more for me to learn. And then at the end of my presentations, I'll tell them, you know, whether you want to be an author or an illustrator or a teacher or a librarian or an inventor of new types of colors, or a congressperson, or the inventor of the super soaker water gun is somebody else that I've written about. Whatever it is that you want to do when you're grown, I hope that you love doing that thing as much as I love doing this. And that someday you'll want to come back to your school and stand up in front of a great big crowd and tell them all about what you do with your life. So it's not about me trying to turn them into other authors, although I hope I do inspire some of them to consider that. But it's really about encouraging them to find what they love doing, encouraging them to find that thing that they can't stop thinking about, the same way that, you know, I can't stop thinking about some of these topics I've written about.
I appreciate the work that you do, the stories that you tell, and the way that you are encouraging other people to ask questions of themselves and of the path that they're on, to hopefully be able to craft their own story. So thanks so much again for being willing to talk with me, but also being willing to talk with other Terry scholars in the network, and again, just remind them of the community they're a part of. So really appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad to do it. I'm glad to do it. You know, it would have been nice when I was a Terry to have had so many generations of Terry scholars ahead of me that I could have learned from. So I'm glad to help provide what was just not in place at the time I was a Terry scholar.
Yeah, it's been so great seeing the way that this community has evolved, even just in the short time that I've been involved. So I can't wait to see, you know, even in another 5 years, another 2 years, what everything looks like.